Good afternoon. How is everybody today? I hope you're doing well. I am doing fine and dandy. And I just want to jump in and say that I could be wrong on this, but I think I've cracked the nut on doing the 1080p streams. It turns out it was a setting here in OBS, not actually something to do with YouTube or my camera. Or even my network connection, but it was something in OBS. It was defaulting to this computer's screen resolution for its own internal stream resolution. Now, this monitor I've got is not much bigger than an expensive, nice laptop screen. So I was probably not cognizant of the fact that it would do that. So I changed those settings. And now, hopefully, I'm streaming in 1080p. And why is it important that a guy just sitting in front of a camera, occasionally moving his hands around and generally looking like a goofy MF, needs to stream in 1080p? Well, primarily, it's so I can fit the player's handbook at an acceptable level of print for those of you who want to follow along with the text on the screen, or basically anything, so it'll look a little bit better when I insert items into the screen. So, you guys let me know if you've got the option to view this in HD, like actual HD, not 720p HD. Hello to Katie, hello to James, hello to Adam. Good to see you all. And I want to take a moment. I kind of ended on this yesterday, but I want to hit this back up. For the screw-ups that happened with YouTube and the scheduling of the video yesterday, the fact that I had a good audience yesterday. I had it peak like 12 viewers yesterday, which for me is a good audience. I mean, you take any other big YouTube channel. I say other, like I'm a big YouTube channel. You take a big YouTube channel. If they have less than 5,000 people viewing it and the live chat just literally blasting off like a Saturn V rocket, it's a disaster for them, right? But for me, having 12 people on when YouTube went all weird and I had to scramble to get things set up and live streaming, the fact that there were 12 people in the audience at peak, even if 3 or 4 of them were just passers-by, like the YouTube algorithm said, hey, there's a fat nerd over here talking about D&D. You want to go watch him? Click. Nope. Click. And then dipped out. Even still, I know there was the usual core of you guys out there watching, even though I did a cold start. And again, as I said yesterday at the end of the video, thank you all. Thank you all very much for being fans of the stream enough that you just jumped in. Hello, Cooley. Hello, Bo. Good to see you both. So yeah, that was kind of a neat thing, and I thank you all very much for that. I did forget to announce something earlier in the week. I know you were here in spirit, Bo. Thank you. I did forget to mention earlier in the week, we will have probably tomorrow, possibly Friday. I'll let you guys know. I'll talk about it in a short form video, perhaps later this evening or afternoon. Mr. Rusty Schaefer will be here to talk about all the work he's been doing with Fantasy Grounds and Virtual Tabletop and how you can run your games on Fantasy Ground, how you can play Virtual Tabletop games. If your group is scattered across the country to the four winds, if you're in a state that is still in lockdown, or if you just prefer a virtual tabletop, Rusty's going to come here and he's going to tell us what he's been doing in Fantasy Grounds and how you can do it too. So we're looking forward to Rusty showing that off. And I just want to point out, I'm not sponsored by Fantasy Grounds. I don't have any sponsors. If you guys see commercials on my YouTube videos, let me know. But as Google owes me some money. But you know, I like to pitch a good product when I see it. I mean, I'm not sponsored by TSR, any TSR. But you know, it's the primary thrust of this live stream, right? So yeah, we'll wait for maybe a couple more people to wander in, and then we're going to talk. Today's class, we're going to start looking at subclasses. Now, what is a subclass? Let's talk about that a little bit. A subclass in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons does not refer to a lesser class, a class that is not as good as the class that precedes it. Rather, these are classes that are within the auspice of what the primary class does, but they do it differently. And virtually every main class has a subclass. For fighters, they have two, the Paladin and the Ranger. For magic users, it's the Illusionist. For clerics, it's the Druid, which actually is arguably the first Dungeons & Dragons class ever. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about the Druid. And finally, for thieves, it's the Assassin. Now, you might be wondering, well, what about multi-classing, Bill? What about dual classing? And what about those bards and those monks? We're going to get to them. We are going to get to them. Not today, obviously. I mean, I think it's going to be enough just to tackle the Paladin and talk a little bit about the Paladin's history. Trying to jump in straight away to talk about more than that would be a bit of a tall order today. So let's grab your player's handbooks. I've got mine here. And we're going to zip down a little bit and look at the Paladin. So we're going to go over to page 22. Save you guys some scoliosis. Whoops. Thank you. All right. So first of all, a little bit of history on the Paladin. Paladins are, of course, a Middle European concept. They're, as I understand it, they're primarily a French noble class, but I'm not exactly up on my history from the time. So here forward, we're going to talk about it in Dungeons and Dragons. Gary was heavily influenced by lots of different fantasy, and one of the biggest pieces of written fantasy literature that plays extremely heavily into first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is an absolute just gem of a book, and it was written by Poul Anderson. It's called Three Hearts and Three Lions. I do recommend tracking down a copy, and I do recommend reading it, not only because it's a damn fine book, but also because it will open your eyes to a lot of Dungeons and Dragons lore, and particularly is the Paladin. The main character finds himself in, and I say finds himself, it's kind of got a Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's court approach in a fantasy version of Central Europe, and that he has become the embodiment of Holger the Dane, a hero of Danish folklore. And Poul Anderson was Danish, so... but Holger very quickly discovers that as he moves deeper into fairy, that is, chaos magic occupied Europe, and if you're thinking that maybe the book ending of this has to do with World War II, you'd be right. But as Holger moves deeper into fairy occupied Europe, one of the things that he discovers is that God is literally on his side. There are certain beings that can't stand to get close to him. He seems to be immune, except when he stumbles on his path to temptations and opposition by creatures of fairy or just creatures of hell itself. It is strongly implied that with the help of some of his traveling companions, he is able to lay on hands and cure disease. And finally, not finally, Holger acquires a war horse. He's got a war horse, and we're going to look at all of those things that the Paladin can do. But Holger the Dane is the Paladin mold. He is the primary influence for Paladins. So let's look at AD&D and how it approaches it. A Paladin character is a fighter subclass, but unlike normal fighters, all Paladins must begin as lawful good. And a lot of people take that to mean, that means I can switch to chaotic good or lawful evil. No. And always remain lawful good or absolutely lose all of the special powers which are given to them. They have both fighting abilities and limited spell powers at higher levels. To become a Paladin, a character must be human, have a strength of not less than 12, a minimum intelligence of 9, a wisdom of 13 or more, a minimum constitution of 9, and not less than 17 charisma. 3d6 down the line makes it extremely difficult to become a Paladin. It isn't even necessarily that easy to get using 4d6, drop the lowest, arrange to taste. But you see here, there's a pretty hard row to hoe when it comes to Paladin abilities. Now, Paladins do get a 10% bonus, and it notes if a Paladin has a strength and wisdom in excess of 15, he or she gains the benefit of adding 10% to the experience points awarded by the Dungeon Master. Now, the next paragraph is very important. Law and good deeds are the meat and drink of Paladins. If they ever knowingly perform an act which is chaotic in nature, they must seek a high level, 7th or above cleric of lawful good alignment, confess their sin, and do penance as prescribed by the cleric. If a Paladin should ever knowingly and willingly perform an evil act, he or she loses the status of Paladinhood immediately and irrevocably. All benefits are then lost, and no deed or magic can restore the character to Paladinhood. He or she is ever after a fighter. Now, one thing I want to say, and we talked about this a little bit with alignment. There's two things you need to keep in mind when it comes to lawful good, particularly when you're dealing with Paladins where variance is limited, to say the best. But first of all, lawful good is not lawful nice. You are not required to spare the life of a ravening beast that's going to keep on ravening just because you brought it to heel temporarily. 2, lawful good does not need to be lawful stupid. If the party says that they're going to torture a prisoner for information, the Paladin who says, well, I'm just going to step away so I don't see that it's happening and I don't know that it's being done, That is the paladin deciding on situational ethics, which is chaotic, and allowing torture even of an evil creature, which is evil. Now, that may not turn them chaotic evil, because generally involuntarily shifting alignment comes upon an axis. You know, a lawful good character might fall to lawful neutrality or lawful evil. But it is still a chaotic act, and it is still, even one time for 5 minutes, an evil act. That character is no longer a paladin. If you choose to take the stats you've got and play a paladin, there are strictures you have to follow. The benefits are many. The benefits can be worth it, but you've got to be willing to play the character to the max. The party wants to torture information out of a bugbear. Either kill it or leave it in chains until such time as we can give it over to the authorities. The magic user wants to use ESP or Charm Monster on it to get the information out that way. That's fine. We're going to cut off one of your fingers or peel the skin off your face until you tell us what's doing. Those are the tools of the enemy. Those are the tools of the great adversary. If you're playing a paladin and the party starts to do this, you have an obligation to stop them by force if necessary, or else you lose your status. You should lose your status. So let us continue. The benefits of an AD&D paladin are: detect evil at up to 60 feet distance as often as desired, but only when the paladin is concentrating on determining the presence of evil and seeking to detect it in the right general direction. So, detect evil, generally speaking, excuse me, can be a PPI, a progressive position indicator, like the radar scope. You know, you see the big radome turning around, and then there's the picture of the screen and the green sweep line going around on the CRT. In the case of the paladin, it's boresight mode. He's scanning very intently in one direction. He or she. Make all saving throws, regardless of the saving throw. You have the favor of your god. Make all saving throws at +2 on the dice. Immunity to all forms of disease. Disease in the Dungeon Master's Guide is a very real thing, and when we start talking about good practices as a dungeon master, you should be using disease. But paladins are immune. Now, this is one that people always kind of focus in on, and I rather like it. The ability to lay on hands, either on others or on his or her own person, to cure wounds. 2 hit points of damage per level of experience the paladin has attained, but laying on hands can be performed but once per day. So very helpful to the party's cleric. The ability to cure disease of any sort. This can be done once per week for each 5 levels of experience a paladin has attained. At levels 1 through 5, 1 disease per week. At levels 6 through 10, 2 diseases. At levels 11 through 15, 3 diseases, etc. Although I would suggest by the time you're a 26 level paladin, that may not be a big deal. But let's move on. Furthermore, at 3rd level, paladins gain the ability to affect undead and devils and demons as if he or she were a 1st level cleric, and this power goes upward with each level of experience a paladin gains. So at 4th level, the effect is that of a 2nd level cleric. At 5th, it is that of a 3rd level cleric, etc. So your high level paladin has functions much like a cleric. So you might ask, why not just fold this into a cleric? Why not just make this a cleric subclass? Clerics can cover a great many deities and a great many pantheons, And this particular class, because they use edged weapons, and because they are paragons of lawful good virtue, they carry the banner of that god's virtue with them. They're not mere proselytizers and holy men. They are exemplars of the best virtues of a lawful good deity. If you're playing in Greyhawk, that's Hieronius, Pelor, Foltus, Cuthbert. Basically, any lawful good god can have orders of paladinhood. Now, this is a neat factor. At 4th level, or any time thereafter, the paladin may call for his warhorse. This creature is an intelligent heavy warhorse with 5+5 hit dice, 5d8 plus 5 hit points, armor class 5, and the speed of a medium warhorse, 18 inches per round. It will magically appear, but only one such animal is available every 10 years, so that if the first is lost, the paladin must wait till the end of the period for another. So you don't treat them like disposable beasts of burden. They're practically your partner. Now, number 9 is rare. I haven't seen number 9 come into play ever in a D&D game, but you should know this. If a paladin has a holy sword, a special magic sword, which your referee is aware of and will explain to you if the need arises, he or she projects a circle of power 1 inch, that's 10 feet in the dungeon, and 10 feet out of doors, in diameter when the holy sword is unsheathed and held, and this power dispels magic at the level of magic use equal to the experience level of the paladin. And then we have, at 9th through 20th level of experience, paladins gain the ability to employ cleric spells. They may never use scrolls of spells, however, except those normally usable by fighters. So starting at 9th level, a paladin may pray for and learn Cure Light Wounds. As we talked about the cleric yesterday, they pray for their spells. Now, more strictures for the paladin. They may never retain more than 10 magic items. These may never exceed 1 suit of armor, 1 shield, 4 weapons, any other 4 magic items. And that's any, guys. That's rings, potions, feather tokens, scrolls, a scroll of protection, wands that are usable by fighter types, such as a wand of magic missiles, a magic carpet, anything, any other magic items. And it doesn't overlap. If you say, but I don't have a magic shield and I only have 3 magic weapons, does that mean I get 6 other magic items? No. That is, to quote Rob Halford, breaking the law. These include, and other weapons, these include magic daggers, swords, etc., and any such item as magic bows and magic arrows are considered but as 1 weapon. So, yes, if you come across 20 plus 1 arrows, it counts as but 1 weapon. So it does bend a little bit there. God is not ungenerous. And then, of course, we have this great illustration. I'm going to zoom out just because this is one of my favorite pieces of D&D artwork. And it should be yours, too, by the way. Whether you're just coming to First Edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons or whether you've been playing it all along. A Paladin in Hell by David C. Sutherland III should be one of your favorite pieces of D&D art. And it's a beauty. Paul Stormberg owns this original pen and ink art. Isn't that cool? He's got that on his wall. Not like he printed that page out and stuck it on the wall behind him. He has the actual piece of artwork by Dave Sutherland. I just think that's too cool for words. Okay, so let's get back to the Paladin themselves. All right. More restrictions on the Paladin class. Once we get to the end of restrictions, I will take some questions. They will never retain wealth, keeping only sufficient treasures to support themselves in a modest manner, pay henchmen, men-at-arms, and servitors, and to construct or maintain a small castle. Excess is given away, as is the tithe. That's 10% of their income. Must be given to a religious institution, not a clerical player character. I'm not going to allow that. Your DM's not going to allow it. And you shouldn't try it lest you want to not be a paladin anymore. And that is Paladin of Heronius in the party, Cleric of Heronius in the party. Here's 10% of my money, Bob. No. That's not how that works. You don't get to do that. Has to go to the church. Paladins will have henchmen of lawful good alignment and none other. You can't hire an assassin if you're a paladin. Well, I'm not going to sneak into the guy's house and murder his face. But Sly McStabbo over here, he does it for hire, so I'll just, slip him a couple hundred gold. No, that's not how that works. They will only associate with characters and creatures of good alignment. They'll put up with the neutral and chaotic good types. Paladins can join a company of adventurers which contains non-evil neutrals only on a single expedition basis, and only if some end which will further the cause of lawful good is proposed. Purposed. If possible, paladins will take service or form an alliance with lawful good characters, whether players or not, who are not clerics or fighters. So that's referring to magic user. Basically, that's all that's left. Magic users. And paladins do not attract a body of men-at-arms to service as do regular fighters. And we see probably one of the hardest climbs in terms of experience here for the paladin. 2751 just to cross the first level barrier. I think you'd have to go through, with a good-sized party, most of the Caves of Chaos and Keep on the Borderlands to get your paladin from first to second level if you're playing it for AD&D. And you can forget getting to third level, probably. But yeah, your 11th level paladin requires 1,000,000 experience points. Well, 1,050,001, and continuing to level thereafter is 350,000 experience points. As fighters, they use the D10 hit die. Conveniently, they gain 3 hit points after 9th level. So that's good. And we have the level titles, which I think are some of the sweeter ones, nicer ones in the game. Gallant Keeper, Protector, Defender, Warder, Guardian, Chevalier, Justicar, and then 9th level is your name level in which you are an actual paladin. And here is the paladin spell progression chart. You can cast all the way up to 4th level spells, maximum spell ability. So no, unfortunately, paladins don't get the ability to raise dead. That is the province of God. Or his appointed servants, more than just exemplars. So let's talk then a little bit about the paladin after we take a few questions. Katie says, so they don't have the Oathbreaker in AD&D. No, they do not. Cooley says, paladins that break their oath basically retain all the XP and hit dice and other factors of the class without any of the class powers. You basically become a really terrible fighter, essentially. Now, one thing that should be noted about the paladin in AD&D is that unlike the fighter who starts out, let me see, let's look at weapons proficiencies. Paladins also have a harder row to hoe when it comes to weapon proficiencies, and I'm trying to think where... you know what, let's just go back up to the table of contents and look. here. All right, there we go. Okay, so we're looking now over on page 37. Yes, paladins begin with only 3 weapons they can be proficient in. Long sword, two-handed sword, and lance. Just letting you know that's how you do the paladin. And like the fighter, you gain an additional proficiency every 3 levels. Using a non-proficient weapon type, you're at -2, just like the fighter and the ranger. And we'll talk about the ranger the next class, whether it's tomorrow or Friday. So let's talk about paladin best practices. They start with the same amount of cash that the fighter does. That's the maximum amount of cash that you can begin. Now, I've never deemed it that the paladin has to tithe 10% of that. I think, and it's not stated in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I would say, if your DM says you have to tithe 10% of it, do it after you've bought your equipment. Leave yourself enough money so that you've got 10%, or do it straight away. But my assumption is that you go out into the world, you walk out of your church into the market square. So you've already given your 10%, but your dungeon master's ideas may vary. And just like any other class, look to getting henchmen and hirelings. You may ask about a warhorse or something like that for a paladin. A simple riding horse is enough. If you have the funds, I would lay off of it, because at 4th level, you're going to get an intelligence 5-hit die creature that's basically your combat companion when you're not in a dungeon. They might even be able to go into the dungeon depending on how big it is or isn't. Paladins have no restriction on weapons. Paladins, being lawful good, will never use poison. Don't go shopping for stuff and say, I want to buy poison. You have no need for it. Can paladins use bows, missile weapons? Absolutely. They can absolutely use missile weapons, and indeed I encourage it. Keeping your enemy at arm's length is paramount, regardless of what class you're playing. So, I said bow, lance, or rather longsword, lance, two-handed sword. Maybe go longsword, two-handed sword, short bow. In actuality, thrown fire, absolutely. Carrying around a flask of oil to throw, absolutely. Don't even, don't even ask the question. But yes, you should be going into the dungeon with men at arms. Whether or not they're lawful good will be up to the DM, but remember, the paladin can detect evil. The DM, unless he or she are just being massive jerks, are not going to stick you with evil henchmen and then say, haha, you didn't realize they're evil, you're not a paladin anymore. Now that brings us to more of a philosophical discussion on the paladin. just a moment. But I'm gonna answer a few questions just a little bit. Stabby McStabface is my assassin's name. Either that or Mac Jones. I will accept either of those. Anti-Paladin NPC is as close they got to Oathbreaker, but an assassin can be considered the PC opposite of the Paladin. Yeah. I mean that's not a bad read, really. And Elton says, "Oh, hello, Elton. Shields must be very interesting for a Paladin." I guess. Okay, sure. So now that we're not looking at the rule book, well, I'm not looking at the rule book specifically. You guys are looking at one page on the rule book. The Paladin in AD&D, I have seen more, pardon my French, bullshit thrown at the Paladin by some players that it's just like it's sand in my gears. First of all, the Paladin is one of my favorite classes. Even years before I read 3 Hearts and 3 Lions, I loved the idea of the Paladin. I mean, you are everything that is awesome about being lawful good in AD&D. But I have heard more stories gleefully told by DMs and other players of groups who give themselves pats on the backs and self-fives about how they made the player with the Paladin fall. The terrible things they did to make the Paladin fall. And any time I've questioned it, I've gotten what I call the Homer Simpson at Itchy and Scratchy World answer. You know, when it like he kicks the costume people and gets thrown in Itchy and Scratchy World jail. And his answer is, like, he's a guy in a mouse costume. I had to kick him. You know, he's a lawful good fighter. We had to make him fall. I mean, to those people, not to you guys, but to those people, I say, you no fun having sadists. Why did you even allow the person to play the class if you didn't want it in the party? I mean, other than to get your masturbatory fantasies of ruining a guy's life and career fulfilled, why would you even say, yeah, you can play a Paladin, and then set about to scheme to make the Paladin fall? Now, if somebody starts playing a Paladin and they say, you know what, I like the character, I like what he's doing as far as being in the game and kind of the role play that's going on, but I think it would be an interesting kink if they fell and the other players in the DM kind of get together to make it happen. These are not the stories that I've heard. I mean, in the 90s when my D&D was laying fallow, did I just miss some paradigm shift where ruining somebody else's fun and ruining their character was the thing to do? I mean, and the thing about it is this is only the Paladin that I've heard these stories about. I've never heard people say, and then we turned the assassin into the local law enforcement. And then we made sure that the thief got arrested by the King's Guard. And then we smudged pages in the magic user's spell book so that his spells were reversed and he got dragged off to the abyss by a demon. So, yeah, I don't get that. I don't get that, and I don't like it. If you are DMing, and you have a player who is very happy to be running a paladin, they got the minimum 13 strength, the minimum 14 wisdom, the minimum charisma 17. And like a pack of hyenas trying to take down the lion, the other players start plotting and scheming. If you're being even-handed and fair, you're not just going to sit back and let that happen to them with no repercussions. Remember when I said the paladin represents the virtue of a lawful good god? That lawful good god should have something to say about that, whether the paladin falls or not. That's just my polemic right there about paladins. Torque 2100, agreed. There's being harsh but fair, and then there's just being a jerk. Yeah, that definitely falls into the jerk category. Like, I'm going to scheme with the other players so that John the Paladin, he won't be a paladin come morning. You know. Now, hey, it's a game. It's all in good fun. But if you're ruining whatever the player's class is, this is just decent tabletop etiquette. Whatever the player's class is, if you're ruining the fun of the player, you're just being a shit. Okay. Elton says, I can also see it as a bit of bashing the righteous, as we've seen so much in media these days. Yeah. You know, I guess when you kind of get into a post-irony, ironic world, you know, anything is available on the table. Let's see. There's a whole subreddit of D&D horror stories, and I'm guessing you're not talking about Tomb of Horrors or Ravenloft there, Katie. So yeah, I've spoken my piece about, you know, don't tear the paladin down. But back to best practices. For the paladin, regardless of what the other players are trying to do to you. Again, you don't get to dip out on the group if they're about to commit some heinous act. The paladin has to stand up against that. Or else, you know, the DM might deem that you're going to lose your paladinhood. Another thing to keep in mind is the fact that if you lose your paladinhood, your warhorse will go away. Your warhorse is there for the paladin, not for John, but for John the Paladin. So you lose your paladinhood, your horse is going to go away. Now, committing an evil act, you can't go back from. There's no coming back once you cross that line. Doing something that's not lawful, maybe the animal leaves you for a short while. Maybe the DM deems that, yeah, get ready to wait another 10 years minus the time that the animal was your companion to summon another one. You know. But that's up to the DM. You can be a beacon for a good party as a paladin player and get the other players to embrace the angels of their better natures. You know, you don't have to say, to the cleric of Cuthbert in the party, I'm not going to do anything for you unless you convert over to Heronius worship. As a paladin player, now I'm no fantasy writer. I can't tell you guys how to play your roles from a role-playing standpoint. I can talk about mechanics and I can talk about best practices to win. But a paladin can really be a banner for a party to rally behind. He can heal, he can fight martially, he can keep evil away. That protection from evil that paladins get. Did we even talk about that? Did we even talk about the paladins' protection from evil and what they can hedge out? And we looked at clerical protection from evil. But a paladin can literally block a hallway with their protection from evil. A narrow enough hallway. Or divert or bottleneck a group of evil monsters. That's druids, monks, assassins. Speaking of opposites, it's kind of scrolling up here. Thieves, magic users. We're getting close. Oh, and yes, paladins do starting at level 7 get an additional attack every other round. Food for thought. And there's a paladin in hell. The continuing emanation of a protection from evil in a 1-inch radius. That's 10 feet. That's 10 feet. If you get Steve, the lawful good fighter, to your left, and Mike, the neutral good fighter, to your right, your right and your left. If you've got them to your sides, in a 10-foot radius, you're protecting them. And anybody that's moving up close behind you to fight with a polearm, you're protecting them per protection from evil. All right? So you're not just a team player. You can be a team captain. You can be a leader. You can be a game manager. There's a little one for Bo. You can be a game manager out there fighting with your players, and the fighting with is an allied with your fellow players. But do use the detection from evil. Lay on hands when necessary. And you use that lay on hands on other characters. If you've got a cleric with your party, now if you're the only person able to dole out healing, force multiplier is important. Keep a player near you healed. Yes, we're talking about paladins, Ricky. And I'm sorry about you not getting off work until the stream is almost done. But hey, you can watch it in HD now. I fixed that. There's a note about laying on hands. I have never seen it stated each way, but when it comes to lay on hands, it can't be broken up as far as you're damaged for 2 points. I have lay on hands for 8 points. I'll give you 2 points. I'll give him a point. I'll give him 3 points, and I'll give another point over here to this guy. It's all at once. It is discharged all at once. That's just how it works. You're not a heal bot per se, but you can keep one other character in the fight. Now let's talk about that high charisma and why that's important. Like I said, the Paladin has the the potential to be a leader, to guide a party. Ricky says you can't break up. Ricky, I don't think you can. Unless I have grossly misread both the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide over the last decade. In first edition AD&D, no, you cannot separate Lay on Hands into packets. It is all or none. But that high charisma, that 17 or 18 charisma, not only means you'll have a lot of followers. If we go back and we look at charisma as an ability, let me just scroll over here. Let's say you're rocking that minimum of 17. The loyalty base of NPCs you hire is increased by 30%. Things have to go horribly off the rails before a paladin's henchman or hireling will consider abandoning or even disobeying them. This can be critical. This can be absolutely critical. You, as the paladin player, need to lean on your charisma heavily. It's the best weapon you've got. Reaction adjustment, 30%. What did we say when we talked about overall best practices? Avoid unnecessary encounters. Parlay is the key to that. If you have a minimum of 30% reaction adjustment, and your DM may use that reaction adjustment for other purposes, what percentage of 100 can we get to sell these gems and jewelry for? Well, we'd like 900 for this necklace. Well, the DM might roll a reaction adjustment just like parlay. If it's the paladin doing the talking, guess what? 30% right on top of that, because he makes a convincing argument for it. And he looks good while he's doing it. He or she. So consider that when you are playing the paladin. The high charisma isn't there just because you want to look like Charlton Heston in El Cid. Okay? It serves an in-game function, and you as the paladin player should be game managing and leaning on it. It will, you might encounter something in the dungeon that's lawful neutral, but maybe is spoiling for a fight just the same. It's up to the paladin to step up and parlay. Okay, who's got the highest charisma? Who can negotiate with these guys? The paladin has to step forward. If you're playing the paladin, you've got to step forward. And if you've got an 18 charisma, it only gets better. You can have up to 15 henchmen. Their base loyalty. If you're an abusive jerk to them and somehow manage to not lose your paladinhood, they've still got an even chance of being loyal to you, even if their loyalty is only 10%. You get 40 added to it, and 35% to the reaction. Creatures just off the bat, whether they're intelligent human or humanoid or demi-human NPCs, or just semi-intelligent creatures you bump into in the wilderness or in the dungeon, you've got a better than 1 in 3 chance of them reacting favorably to you. So lean on that charisma. That is the key best practice for a paladin. Yes, you're an awesome fighter. Yes, you look good while you're doing it. Yes, you can protect the party from evil. Yes, you can detect evil. But really, you've got the charisma for a reason. Use it. Use it. Let's see. So I'm going to go and look at some of these here. I also lay on hands as more of an inspirational action rather than a healing mechanic. The Paladins in my games were always leading and inspiring by example. Well, Adam, you're doing it right. Thumbs up to you. Hence the high charisma. Hello, Chris. I see you there. Ricky says, I always considered it as the hands of the kings from Lord of the Rings. Aragorn could heal tons of people when he was king. But Aragorn was doing that as a high-level ranger, and I am going to explain that to you. That's the next. We're going to look at the ranger next. The problem is finding dungeon masters that allow hirelings in the game. Most seem to be scared of having mass combat. I'm sorry, dude. I really am. I wish that wasn't the case. I'm right there with you. I mean, I really desperately wish that wasn't the case. When we talk about practices as a DM, I will talk more about henchmen and hirelings, because I know that's what you guys wanted to hear after I talked about it for 3 days, not but a month ago. If you're playing old school, followers are mandatory. Absolutely, Ricky. If the DM can't handle that, they shouldn't be running. Well, it might be something that the DM has to work up to. Okay? It might be something that the dungeon master has to learn and has to work up to. Give them a chance. Run them yourself as a player. Say, hey, look, I've got, Luke, Ernie, Gary, and Alex. They're my men-at-arms. I'll control them in combat. That might ease a little bit of the burden of the new DM. Now, one thing I do want to say, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on matters of DMing just yet. Most of the advice about men-at-arms, regardless of whether they're for a paladin or anyone else, most of that goes out the door for convention settings, for reasons we'll discuss on down the line. So, Ricky says, I make my players run their followers, doesn't everyone? I don't mind running them when it comes to mass combat. The thing with followers out of combat is some of your more cavalier players, and I'm not talking about the cavalier class, some of your more cavalier players might feel like they can treat followers like cannon fodder, even if the characters are lawful good, that they can just order these guys, okay, Ernie, Luke, Gary, Alex, here's your wooden sticks, and you got a couple of rusty daggers. We're going to flee the dungeon. You guys stay here and hold off that band of hill giants coming down the hall. And then they look at me, the DM, and say, they'll do that. No. You as the DM have got to step up and remember that they're non-player characters. Don't let the players essentially, I call, the fighter with 4 hirelings, 4 heavy foot, tries to be like the octopus man. He's got multiple arms that he can hit a monster with. You, the DM, need to manage the henchmen yourself. And Adam, you're absolutely right. It can get pretty busy. That's where an electronic die roller can make all the difference in the world. You got 15 men at arms, you do roll 15 d20, and then you can look at all the results rather than sitting there trying, okay, did anybody got any dice? Let me get some dice. That's one. That's oh no, that's 16. That missed. Being able to roll massive amounts of dice all at once is paramount. So, yeah, as a paladin, you can get lots of followers or lots of hirelings and henchmen. Just remember too that you don't establish a landhold like fighters do. Let's look over at that. So yeah, paladins do not attract a body of men-at-arms to service as do regular fighters. So if you do get a chance to construct a castle, you won't automatically attract people. You will have to hire them, hence the high charisma. You will literally have to pay people to live near you. But once they do, man, they'll get all the benefits. Oi, me daughter's sick. Whom. Now she's better. Yeah, that's something else. The cure disease. Your party's going to love your ability to cure disease. Trust me. Once you can start doing it twice a week. And that's not like, okay, you did it on Monday, but it's only Tuesday, so you can't do it again. You can do it like, oh, Bob's got typhus and Steve's got pneumonia. Bop, bop. You can't do it again for another 7 days, but you could do it all at once right there. So food for thought, guys. Food for thought. So any questions? Any more questions today? Ricky's dice are a class 3 narcotic. Yes, they are. Oh, Ricky just tearing up the comments there. You guys can see that. Anybody over on Facebook who's not seeing this, I always ran my followers and henchmen as NPCs, which can get pretty busy. I handle their personality, dictate if the followers will do it, but I have the players suggest and manage the sheet, die rolling, and mechanics. It's possible that I own a bunch of dice and that I can roll all at once, but it's not an addiction, I swear. Yes. I think we all have that. I'm down to a single Crown Royal bag of dice these days. I mean, I've got a few ancillary amounts tucked here and there, but generally I just have a few that I like. Thoughts on lawful stupid? I almost feel like I should have gotten into lawful stupid and chaotic stupid and stupid evil when I talked about alignments, but for what a paladin should not be, lawful stupid in this context would mean deliberately oblivious to evil things just to let it squeak by so as to not disadvantage the party or themselves. Broadly, lawful stupid is like, ineffably evil creatures who still detect as evil, saying, oh, I've changed my ways, or I want to fight you honorably. And the paladin going, okay, and assuming the best out of it. Paladins aren't dumb. They shouldn't be played as dumb. They have a minimum of average intelligence of 9. That is, the dumbest they are is just the high average of everyone's intelligence. Yeah, exactly, Ricky. Before you got here, I was talking about, oh, I will go outside and guard the hallway while you guys stand in here with this bugbear and politely ask him questions about where the treasure is. And, the party proceeds to, cut the bugbear's fingers off, waterboard him, and any number of horrible things. No, the paladin's not going to do that, and the paladin's not going to allow the party to do that. And he shouldn't. And if he does, that's something they have to atone for. Because that's situational ethics, and that is a chaotic thing to do. Character is what you do when nobody's looking, and the paladin should live by that. There's another best practice for paladins. So that's how I feel about that. So we're at about an hour. Any more questions? Anyone at all about the paladin? The next time we talk, we're going to talk about rangers, and we're going to talk about the hands of the king are a healer's hands, and why that applies more to rangers than to paladins. Again, the paladin is straight out of 3 Hearts and 3 Lions. to a T. There's a scene where, in the book, I don't want to spoil it too much. You really should read 3 Hearts and 3 Lines. It's breezy. You can knock it out in an afternoon. Put it on your late summer reading. Yes, Ricky, I covered the mounts for the Paladin. But in 3 Hearts and 3 Lions, towards the end of the book, the party consists of Holger, a dwarf named Huey, a swan may / ranger named Alanora, and another paladin whom they're not completely sure about. He's a Saracen. So Alanora starts acting very sweet on the Saracen. This confusticates and bebothers poor Holger. So he stomps off to check on some fish traps, and while he's checking on them, he accidentally lets he's got like a chum line in the water of the lake, and when he's pulling it up to check on it, he stabs himself in the ball of the thumb with a hook and yells, "God damn it." Right at that minute, a Nixie leaps up out of the lake and pulls him in and starts talking about, it's Poul Anderson, it's adolescent fantasy, so it's not like openly crass and pornographic, but basically talking about all the lovely things she'd like to do with him. It shouldn't have been able to touch him, but in that moment when he took the Lord's name in vain and he was angry about Alanora, he lost his grace. He temporarily lost his protection from evil 10-foot radius, and the Nixie was able to grab him and drag him into the water. And later he comes back around and his grace is restored. So no, Ricky, I disagree with you. I think it's a fantastic story. I think it's amazing, and I think it's lovely. And I'm going to read it this weekend just to spite you. Anyway. But I kind of get what you're saying, ending it with the World War II stuff. I think we could have had a good fantasy story. We can like do an in-depth look at Poul Anderson and his impact on D&D another time. But I will say that I feel like Poul Anderson wanted to do more science fiction than fantasy, but he had fun doing fantasy, but he still felt it necessary to try and ground fantasy. So we'll talk about that another time. So, any more questions? Anything else anyone would like to know about Paladins today? I hope I've given you a good idea of what is necessary to play a Paladin in first edition AD&D and the importance of playing the Paladin right. The importance of playing the Paladin right. So I'll see if I got any more comments coming up here. And by the way, anyone who watches these streams from the beginning, let me know if you can see the comments. A lot of times, like, I'll go in and look at a comments or look at a video without being logged in. Just like I'll launch Microsoft Edge. I don't log into anything in Microsoft Edge. I use it for reasons on my main PC. And I'll come to my videos and I'll see like, oh, I'll watch yesterday's video. None of the comment stream is viewable. And I don't run ad blockers or anything like that. It just The chat stream doesn't show up. Some of them they do. Sometimes YouTube will display them and sometimes it won't. And I don't know why that is. So, anyway. Well, all right. We've reached the top of the hour, guys, and I need to wrap up. Thank you all very, very much for hanging out today. I appreciate it. I will be back tomorrow. I'll throw out a little short chit-chatty video tonight. Don't know about what it'll be, but you'll see something. And tomorrow, or I'll let you know tonight whether tomorrow Rusty Schaefer will be here or if it's going to be Friday that Rusty is here. But one of those 2 days, Rusty will be here and we'll be talking about virtual tabletops. So I'm looking forward to that. The day that isn't, we're going to talk about Rangers in first edition AD&D. And then we will be done with fighter subclasses. And then we'll move on to illusionists and then, of course, druids, and then assassins, and then we'll look at the weirdo classes, and we're going to finish up the player's handbook looking at and learning about psionics and all the baggage that comes with psionics, okay? All right, guys, listen, have an absolutely wonderful day. Be good to each other. Stay safe. I'll see you tomorrow. Just have a great day, man. Y'all have a wonderful day. Thank you for making the channel wonderful. Oh, last mention, we now have 733 subs. That's amazing. That's in no small part to you guys. I don't remember who said yesterday they were going to go out and spread the good word about the live streams on Twitter. Thank you. If that got us a few subs more, then awesome. You guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you all tomorrow. I love you. Take care. Peace. Bye-bye.